Trauma is a very common factor contributing to mental disorders of all kinds. We usually differentiate between acute and chronic trauma. Acute trauma is something like being a victim of a crime or being involved in an accident, losing a loved person or something like this. This is what we call an acute trauma. Acute traumas can cause what we call post-traumatic stress disorders. But this depends very much also on the personality of a person, if she or he is resilient to that kind of trauma. But what is much more common are so-called chronic traumas. These traumas are not so very dramatic, but they go through the lives of these people in particular during childhood and youth. And this starts with in childhood, like being abused, which is a very common thing. It's not only sexual abuse, it's also emotional abuse in various forms. Emotional abuse is very common and really affects your personality development. But it's also physical abuse, all kinds, getting beaten by parents, mistreated by parents, or bullying in school, things like this, which we all more or less experience in our lives, but dependent on the quantity and the continuity of the chronic trauma, it affects the personality development and contributes to almost all mental disorders. We are particularly susceptible to trauma because during that time we develop as a person, our personality develops during that time, but naturally this is all at the time when our brain grows. I mean, it takes a long time. The development of the brain lasts until 20 years of age, 25 years of age. So we know that young people are very difficult at times, at puberty, for example, because the brain is developing and restructuring mainly during that time. And this is the time where we also are very susceptible to all kinds of influences from our environment. All times in your development are special times, and special times for trauma. Like when you are a teenager, you are more susceptible to bullying because this is something which is around you. You know, like, for example, I might give you an example. Young girls are susceptible to overweight at that time. And if they get bullied or mobbed at that time for being a little bit overweight, you know, they start starving. They start looking at their eating patterns and things like this, what easily can result in some kind of eating disorders, in particular in an environment which is very ambitious, for example. So if the parents are very demanding concerning your school achievements, together with getting bullied for being overweight, this might cause very likely some kind of eating disorder. Well, chronic trauma manifests in the type of personality you develop. So we don't really know why you become, for example, a more dependent personality, more narcissistic personality, but it is very clear that trauma, in a way, affects all these kinds, all facets of your personality. In some cases, this is caused more by, let's say, genetic. Other people depend more on their environment. But in combination of your genetic liability and the environmental influences, you develop a certain kind of personality, which in later life might be quite dysfunctional. And this is what it is about. Personality is nothing particular like a neurotic disorder, a specific behavior like OCD, for example. It affects your whole personality and how your personality is composed. And this is what makes it up, that you in a way can function in this world, but quite some time you function dysfunctionally. Again, usually what we need is quite intensive psychotherapy. There are special trauma sessions you can have with trauma specialists who in a way are focused on the treatment of a trauma. But normally this only is part of the whole treatment, as other psychotherapeutic approaches are important as well. We combine it, if necessary, with medication, and in particular in Kusnacht Practice, we combine it with bioarm. Again, we take a good start at Kusnacht Practice between 4 and 8 weeks. Most of these people have been treated previously, so we have to find out and to tailor the treatment for each client, specifically to his or her needs. And we offer continuous care for those people, because it is very clear if they are exposed to continuous trauma, they always are at risk to relapse in their dysfunctional behavior. And this is what we offer to those people, to stay in contact, to continue with psychotherapy and give advice for the long run. We should never continue forever with psychotherapy. You always should try to live your own life. This is very clear, but it depends a little bit on the extent and quantity of trauma, what kind of trauma persons were exposed to. We know by experience that it usually takes a couple of years treatment, but naturally not always in very intensive treatment, but we try to prolong the interval, and our aim is always to that the client can lead their own lives.